DC Comics superheroes might be some of the most iconic, but not all heroes at DC have power sets that are winners. And even those that do don't always have powers that make sense. Oh boy. When it comes to Powergirl, her powers are odd in the way that they are restricted, let's say, or at least how they used to be restricted. Specifically, we're talking about her power of invulnerability here. She can't be harmed by anything really, because, well, invulnerable. Except sometimes natural materials? So I'm pretty sure that, like her Atlantean heritage, which was also a thing at one point in her origins history, seriously, this happened, you can look it up, this restriction and weakness was also retconned out of existence, but there was a time where if Powergirl got into a fight and someone threw a stick or a stone at her hard enough, it could literally break her bones, as this was her one vulnerability. Very strange. What do you think are some just like weird powers in terms of restrictions that exist? Sometimes there are just things that I'm like, but why? I think it says it all when you belong to a team with the words substitute heroes in the title. Dag Wentham is known as Stone Boy, and he belongs to the team known as the Legion of, yes, substitute heroes. He is an alien from the planet Zwen who can transform into a stone form, becoming super strong and durable. Sounds pretty cool, right? But this also immediately makes him, unable to move. Not super useful in combat if you want to, I don't know, do anything other than just survive, I guess. Let me put it another way. Stone Boy has also not been spotted since the New Earth continuity. I think that tells you just how ridiculous his abilities are. So ridiculous that we can't even seem to find a place for him in the massive universe that is the Prime Earth continuity. And this is even after he finally manages to gain some ability in a possible future to move somewhat while in his stone form post 0 hour. Zatanna is one of those characters who can do pretty much anything, but even she has rules that she needs to play by, which make her powers kind of a little weird. Case in point, her powers allow her to cast magical spells, and she can do almost anything with those magical spells. Magic is wild in the sense that, yeah, you can do anything you can really imagine, or anything there's a spell for at least, but at the same time, it's not necessarily something that's easy to do. It has taken, dedication, focus, willpower, years of training, and a natural aptitude for Zatanna to get where she is. And even then, she still has to say all of her spells backwards apparently. Although this might seem like a weird restriction on paper, and yes, you're right, it definitely is. With Zatanna in Justice League Dark, we'd actually learned that the reason that she has to say her spells backwards is because magic, being naturally wild, had to be tamed in some way by rules on Earth. And so that is just one of the rules that was used to prevent it from becoming too chaotic and disrupting the balance in the world. Funny Man is an odd superhero who historically is actually pretty significant, despite how weird he may seem. He's not just powerful for how much of a goofball he is powerful in a historical context, which I think means he deserves a spot here on this list. Funny Man was a creation of Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster after they left DC and they began what would become an epic and a long time legal dispute over the rights to Superman. It's very interesting. If you haven't looked into it, highly recommend. A very fascinating part of comic book history. And honestly, rightfully so. They felt they weren't being fairly paid their dues, and we figured that out, and now that's also why they're always credited whenever we talk about Superman. Siegel especially was passionate about getting the rights back. After leaving DC, they reconnected with former DC editor Vin Sullivan, who had started his own comic book company, Magazine Enterprises. Jerry and Joe tried to recreate the magic of Superman, but this time by teaming up to make something entirely different and new. Funny Man. Celebrating their love of comic book pranks and humor, Funny Man was comedian Larry Davis, who after a publicity stunt gone wrong, ends up actually catching a real-life criminal and decides to just become a bona fide superhero, cause why not? Using his jokes and his funny pranks to apprehend and stop criminals. A wacky idea that sadly did not end up panning out in the end, as the character only lasted, sadly, 6 issues. Oh no. Funny Man didn't have any powers, but he was miraculously and comically good at stopping villains with his antics, and sometimes also did this by accident. Elasti Woman. I love Rita Farr. She is just one of the members of DC's Doom Patrol. In the show Doom Patrol, Rita might struggle to utilize and control her powers, still afraid of them and honestly of her appearance while using them, as well as becoming permanently stuck in her creepy elastic form when she uses it. But in the comics, Elasti Woman has actually learned to master these abilities abilities. Rita gained her powers while she was a Hollywood actress and was working on a set in Africa. She was exposed to volcanic gas, which allowed her to change the size of her body and her limbs at will, also having the ability to stretch her limbs out. John Byrne's interpretation of the character was also able to alter the size of objects as well, just by touching them, and the current Prime Earth continuity version of her also has shape-shifting abilities. I also feel like DC's Doom Patrol television series just does like an amazing job of capturing what shapeshifting or what stretching powers would be like in real life, and how they would actually be really scary, like the whole horror and body dysmorphia aspects that probably would come with that. So if you also haven't watched Doom Patrol, you should go do it. Crazy Jane is a member of the Doom Patrol as well, and honestly that is just a great team to look at if you want to find some superheroes who are quite powerful but also super weird. Jane is no exception to that rule, of course. She's kind of like Marvel's Legion, who actually appeared only a few years before Jane made her debut over at DC Comics, first appearing in Doom Patrol issue number 19 in the 1987 series created by comic book writing legend Grant Morrison and masterful artist Richard Case. Crazy Jane is Kay Chalice, who within her has at least 64 personalities, each with their own personas and their own power sets. The challenging thing is that Jane often struggles to find balance with the various personalities residing within her and has demonstrated various levels of control over them. Wildcat initially was boxer Ted Grant, who didn't actually have any superpowers, but instead had amazing fighting prowess. However, over time, as sometimes does happen, he would also gain powers via, well, a curse. It doesn't even sound like a curse based on actually what it did for him. It gave him resurrection powers, but with a weird, oddly thematically fitting limit in regards to his number of lives. He only gets 9 because he's a cat. Get it? He only has 9 lives. Probably one of the strangest but also most powerful heroes out there, honestly, is Metamorpho. Metamorpho made his first appearance back in 1965 in The Brave and the Bold issue number 57 and has also been known as the Element Man in the comics. He has a very unique and interesting power set that allows him to transform his body or his body parts into any element. This also gives him a pretty unique look as well. Metamorpho isn't the only hero to exhibit these powers though, and at one point we also had Element Girl. The story ended up being quite dark in the end, very bleak actually. But before Sandman happened, she did assist Metamorpho on some of his adventures. Both Element Man and Element Girl are believed to be agents of the Egyptian sun god Ra, Amun-Ra. He created beings that apparently were known as Metamorphae, and that's apparently what they are. Aquaman is an interesting character. Oftentimes he is considered to be one of the weakest members of the Justice League, and is often, I would say, the butt of many DC Comics fans' jokes. Maybe a little less now that Jason Momoa was Aquaman recently, but still, at the end of the day, that is a thing that did happen, and I would actually say that Aquaman, when you think about it though, is actually pretty nuts when it comes to his power set, at least in the modern day. I feel like the fact that we used to make fun of him so much seems goofy. Although if we go back, I guess, to some of the more old school rules when it comes to his power set, maybe it is easier to see why so many people considered him kind of weak in comparison to his fellow heroes on the Justice League. One restriction that was pretty weird was that because Aquaman was from Atlantis, he actually needed to be dipped in water periodically, or he would literally dry out, making him useless and putting him in great danger if he was away from water too long. He literally became a fish out of water. However, in the water, very powerful. Now just pretty much powerful all the time, I think. Arm Fall Off Boy has to be one of the weirdest ones out there. Unlike another odd hero, Bouncing Boy, who eventually in the Prime Earth continuity did achieve his dream, Arm Fall Off Boy has never made the cut for the Legion of Superheroes. Sad. And that is saying something, considering that the Legion of Superheroes themselves are a pretty weird superhero team by all definitions. Arm Fall Off Boy has the power to detach his limbs, which he typically then attempts to use to beat his enemies with. And I mean, it is pretty cool that he can like remove his limbs and survive that, but it's also less cool that really all he does from there is like use his arm or his leg as a weapon. Especially as this means now he has like less limbs to actually move around with and use in combat. It's really pretty silly. And so is the onomatopoeia that often is used to describe the sound of his power, which I love. It is plorp. So satisfying, but also very disturbing to read on a page when someone removes their arm. Plorp.
Alan Scott. Alan Scott is the original Green Lantern, the original powerhouse of the Justice Society, and he is the most unique of the human heroes to gain the Green Lantern title, in my opinion. Alan's ring is unique as it is powered by the Star Heart, a repository of magical energy made by the Guardians of the Universe. This allows him to do things like releasing Eldritch Blasts. His ring also has an inexplicable vulnerability to wood, but for me, what makes Alan Scott a little extra weird is that his ring transformed him into an energy being. Alan Scott absorbed the Starheart into himself after years of using it, basically becoming it himself. Unfortunately, this raises a lot of questions. How did it turn him into energy? He internalized the power source, but that shouldn't have made him energy. How does he get hurt when his corporeal form is now just his own concept of who he is? He should just now be completely invincible, but that doesn't seem to be the case. As a being of energy, he can kind of just make the rules whatever he wants them to be, and I guess the rules are that he can get hurt. Now, despite his incredibly confusing continuity, Hawkman and Hawkgirl are both characters I have always thought were just kinda super cool. I mean, look at them and those giant wings. It's awesome, but it's actually not the wings that allows them to fly. Hawkman actually achieves lift and actually most of his powers thanks to his nth metal belt and boots. Nth metal has psychoreactive electromagnetic and gravitational properties, so when he wills it, the nth metal will use anti-gravity to grant him lift. The wings then provide the thrust and the maneuverability. Where it gets weird is how the nth metal provides his other powers, notably super strength, super durability, super vision, and a healing factor. Gravitational properties could totally help him with the super strength, allowing him to probably negate an object's mass. Sure, but I can't really think of any way to explain the durability, which usually accompanies strength, the super vision, and most of all, the healing factor. All of those abilities are gained from his nth metal, but it makes no sense. Now, many a time have I spoken about Elongated Man, who somehow managed to gain his abilities by consuming a certain fruit. His origin is pretty ridiculous, but when it comes to stretching heroes, only one has really gone to the point of making absolutely no sense, and his name is Plastic Man. Plastic Man is known to the nerdy community for being one of the most surprisingly powerful superheroes DC Comics has. After being exposed to unknown chemicals, Plastic Man gained the ability to manipulate his own body on a molecular level, meaning he has complete control over its shape, size, and density. He's able to alter his size, which I'm not even going to go into that, but he's also been able to stretch his limbs, transform into other people or objects, allowing him to do things like fly and increase his strength. He's practically invulnerable and immortal and can regenerate if he does get hurt. That is all fine. Where it goes completely off the rails is when this guy turns himself into things like a working aeroplane and a space rocket. So now he can just change the actual chemical makeup of his body, produce fuel, and create combustion? Nah. Next up, Martian Manhunter is one of my actual favorite superheroes. He's super cool. He's so, how you say, mysterious. Just like some of his powers. Martian Manhunter is like a Swiss army knife. He's super strong and durable on the level of Superman. He can fly, he has shape-shifting powers, which also somehow allows him to increase or decrease his size, which irks me to no degree. He has some of the strongest telepathy on the entire planet, and while still being super durable and strong, he can also be completely intangible. He can fire extremely powerful beams of mysterious energy out of his eyes that are pretty much the same as Superman's, except not powered by the sun, and we have no idea where that amount of energy is actually coming from. And while also having all those other abilities, he can also go completely invisible. Not just blending into the background, but legit invisible. I love him because of how powerful he is while also having his personality, but sometimes it feels like he was just given powers to make him a backup Superman. So as most fans of DC Comics know, Kryptonians are wildly powerful. Superman and his entire race are godlike aliens who have a very limited number of weaknesses. Most Kryptonians are similar in other universes as well. Superman's cousin Supergirl is entirely the same when it comes to her powers and weaknesses, if not on different levels based on experience and all that jazz. But Supergirl has a multiversal counterpart in the form of Powergirl, who is basically the exact same person but from Earth 2. But for some reason, this Kryptonian from Earth 2 has all her invulnerabilities reduced to nothing in the face of a pointy enough twig. It was revealed that Powergirl is vulnerable to raw, unprocessed materials, meaning she is vulnerable to both wood and rocks. Do you hear how ridiculous that is? Raw, unprocessed materials make up almost the entire natural world. The weirdest thing about this is that no other Kryptonians from Earth 2 share this weakness. It's just Powergirl, and it didn't even last forever. Next up is Metamorpho. Metamorpho is an elemental superhero with the power to transmute his body into various forms using different periodic elements that were found in the human body. Now, originally known as the archaeologist Rex Mason, he was exposed to the Orb of Ra in Egypt, and it changed him into one of the mythical Metamorphi. That, or he was exposed to the energy of an ancient meteorite. Either one. So yeah, his powers are mostly mythical and somewhat magical, which makes arguing with them in any way kinda pointless, but that's never stopped me before. Now, when he first appeared, Metamorpho was only able to change his body into and use elements that were already found within the human body. And if anything is going to make sense, then that is probably the thing that does make sense. But what's weird is that a part of Metamorpho's body managed to separate and form a duplicate of Metamorpho, and it started calling itself Rufus, aka Shift. For some reason, Shift could manipulate all elements, not just the ones inside the human body, and eventually, when Metamorpho reabsorbed Shift into himself, he also gained that power boost. That is the problem I have with Metamorpho, not the endless list of other things that he can do. Next up, the Red Bee isn't particularly outstanding. Rick Rowley is just a guy in a suit who fights crime, usually with a stinger ray which he can effectively use against enemies. That is what it is. Can't argue with it. A dude in a suit with a taser. Cool. What is outstanding to the point of being almost completely unbelievable is that Red Bee has figured out how to train bees. Red Bee can use his favorite bee, who is named Michael, for spying and infiltration, but he was also said to have trained many other bees other than Michael. It's just that Michael is the only truly talented of his bees who has also learned or developed the ability to use his stinger multiple times without tearing his own body apart and going to bee heaven. Rick can find another genius bee to replace Michael if Michael expires. There is no further explanation, and I personally don't need one. Sounds pretty self-explanatory to me. Training bees. Now, Friendly Fire is a member of the superhero group called the All-Star Section 8. He has the power to project energy blasts from his fists. That's cool. At least maybe it would be if he was anyone else, but he is Friendly Fire, and Friendly Fire is a special case. It may be kind of redundant to say that his ability makes no sense because, yeah, he is kind of a joke character, but Friendly Fire never hits his intended target with any of his attacks, and what's worse is that no matter how hard he tries, he always accidentally hits innocent people, and more often than not, specifically his friends and allies. What's crazy is that even when he really tried, he still managed to not only blow off his own head, like straight up, but he even managed to still hit his own ally, Defenestrator. The question I like to ask myself is if this is actually an accident. Is this just gross negligence? Is he really just that bad at aiming, or is this an actual legit byproduct of his power? Does his power actually force him to never hit his target? Am I asking a pointless question? Yes, but you asked for this. Or maybe you didn't. I don't know. If you want to talk about heroes that are just completely wacky and nonsensical, we don't need to look any further than the Doom Patrol. And for our runner-up spot, we're looking at Danny the Street, a living sentient street who can teleport to any city in the world. He was first introduced in Doom Patrol Volume 2 number 35 in 1990, and his main purpose and drive in this world is to bring happiness to those who inhabit whatever city he is currently set up in, giving those who have nowhere to go a place to rest their heads. Now, I want it to be known that I love Danny. He is incredibly wholesome. He likes to cross-dress and dress himself in a nice pink frilly decorations on some of his buildings. He can communicate through signs and billboards, but he cannot actually speak himself. He eventually became the headquarters of Doom Patrol, and at one point he grew to be Danny the World, which was an entire planet, yes, and then at another point he was deconstructed down to Danny the Brick. And one time he was even just the humble Danny the Alley. Do I even need to say why this makes no sense? I don't think I do. And finally, are your superpowers not making any sense? Well, I have an easy fix for you. Just tag on the word mystery and that should solve your problems. I'm assuming that's what Flex Mentallo did when he described his superpower of muscle mystery. Flex here has the absolutely insane ability to manipulate reality in a whole handful of ways simply by flexing different muscles. Now, I'm not going to argue with this much. For starters, Flex was created from a drawing. That's how he came into reality, so there is really no basis for me to even start to justify anything about him and his abilities. By flexing different muscles, Flex can do some relatively normal superhero things like gaining super strength, durability, and all that jazz, but he can also flex muscles in order to, I don't know, survive and travel in the vacuum of space, or fly, or travel dimensions, or create energy constructs, or control his own pheromones, or control people's minds, or see the future, or even use telepathy and telekinesis, and you just kinda have to accept it, because that's the way it is. The Legion of Superheroes seems to just be a sticky flytrap for all the random and wacky superheroes out in the universe. Unlike a lot of others, Rainbow Girl didn't actually make it onto that team as her powers were deemed not useful enough. She just tried out, got rejected, and instead she made it onto the Legion of Substitute Heroes, which I'm assuming is the Legion that villains either don't listen to or the Legion that just puts on a movie for villains instead of fighting them. Rainbow Girl can harness the whole emotional spectrum. Red for rage, orange for green, yellow for fear, green for will, blue for hope, indigo for compassion, and violet for love. But unlike the lanterns of each of those different emotional colors, Rainbow Girl has no ring to use the power through. She can just kinda do it. The problem is she just cycles through the colors impulsively, leading to terrible mood swings. Not only was this incredibly offensive, having a female hero whose main thing is awful mood swings, but it kind of makes, no sense. There is no real explanation for why her powers are the way they are, and there's no explanation for why she has mood swings or how she even uses her powers with no lantern ring to do the stuff that the rings do. Now, Wally West is easily the fastest of all the speedsters out there. He has an almost spiritual connection to the Speed Force that allows him to do a great number of things, like traveling through time to creating electrical energy constructs. Thanks to a heart condition of all things, Wally has even been able to freeze time, which basically allows him to move at super speed without actually moving at super speed. And if you can explain to me exactly how that works, then I'll give you $1 single, because that's probably all I have. Now, the Speed Force is basically time, the representation of reality in motion, being the very cosmic force that pushes space and time forward. So how is it that people like Wally can hold chunks of it, create lightning constructs with it, absorb speed and momentum from people or things? As a concept for time, a cosmic force, it is really hard to both wrap your head around and explain the Speed Force and all the things that speedsters like Wally West and Barry Allen are able to do with it. You kinda just have to accept it for what it is. Sorry. Alec Holland was a scientist who created a restorative growth formula before being doused in the chemical by gangsters and set on fire. He jumped into a nearby swamp and was reborn as the Swamp Thing. Eventually, it was revealed that Alec Holland had actually passed away that night, and the creature that emerged from the swamp was a humanoid plant elemental creature with Alex's memories. Regardless, the Swamp Thing is basically a god. An earth elemental and avatar of the green, essentially a god of plants with unimaginable levels of superhuman strength, durability, and inability to feel pain. He can regenerate from plant life, he can move at the speed of light, alter his size drastically, shapeshift to grant himself abilities like flight and duplication, he has control over plants which allows him to teleport through plant life as well, and thanks to his connection to the green, he can even move through time, and possesses cosmic awareness, and he can even possess other humans, all from a restorative growth formula, a fire, and jumping into a swamp. Now, a whole lot of superheroes have similar origin stories, and I mean, let's be honest, how many different ways can you realistically come up with for someone to gain superpowers that actually make sense? Not a lot, I bet. Lots of superheroes have created the source of their own powers with science. Our Man was the first example of this in the DC universe. Rex Tyler created the Miraclo pill that gave him superhuman strength and durability for an hour each day. Just 1 hour. The fact that it only works for an hour is just odd on its own. Was that the limit of what he was able to do? How did he make that a trait of a pill? Why does it take exactly 60 minutes for the pill to wear off? How does it boost strength and hardness of his skin? What happens to the extra mass? Why didn't he just modify it to always work, if not by himself, then by using other people's research? Why was it physically addictive? I have questions, Hour Man, and it may take more than an hour for you to answer them, so I hope that's okay. Some of our heroes' powers really only come to light or become useful in very specific situations, and some literally only appear in key events, never to be seen again. For Justice League founding member Aquaman, an example of that kind of power came during the Brightest Day crossover event which followed the awesome Blackest Night. In Blackest Night, Aquaman was one of a bunch of heroes and villains that were resurrected from the underworld to become members of the Black Lantern Corps. After their defeat, the remaining heroes and villains who returned to the land of the living had to now find their purpose. Aquaman was returned with the purpose of both saving Aqualad and preventing a war between Atlantis and Zabel. Now Arthur found that since he was resurrected to serve as a member of the Black Lantern Corps, he was now able to summon undead sea life to come to his aid. Trust me when I say that it is much cooler than you might expect. I guess if you kind of suspend reality a little bit, it can sort of make sense, but is he resurrecting that sea life? Is he just controlling their lifeless bodies? When Aquaman controls fish, I thought it was like a telepathic thing, but now I'm kind of thinking that he's just forcing their little fish bodies telekinetically to do what he wants, which is creepy. Beast Boy is the comedic relief of the Teen Titans. His ability to transform into animals is perfect for jokes and for their awesome battles, but because he is a bit of a silly little guy, I feel like DC kind of decided that how he got his powers and why they are the way they are just doesn't really need a ton of explanation. Beast Boy gained his powers from what his wiki describes as, and I'm not joking, an unspecified incident. Another origin says that he gained his powers through a blood transfusion from a green monkey and gained the ability to change into any type of animal. Now, shapeshifting is a power that doesn't really make sense at all. Like, where does the extra mass come from or go to when they shapeshift? That's one that applies to all shapeshifters, but for Beast Boy, why does he only turn into animals? What keeps him from shapeshifting into humans? Now, it will be explained that his shapeshifting is a part of his connection to the mystical force known as the Red, but other characters that are connected to the Red simply use the abilities of other animals. I love Beast Boy, so whatever, but it's still kinda weird. First ever appearing in the back pages of the very first issue of Sensation Comics of 1942, which also contained the premiere of Wonder Woman, the original Mr. Terrific, and the Atom, Ted Grant is one of the world's best hand-to-hand fighters, particularly when it comes to boxing, being the one to train several other DC fighters, including Batman. Ted's dad, Henry Grant, had taught and trained him so well that Ted became a Wildcat in the ring. He eventually goes on to become a superhero named Wildcat. Cool, love it, simple. Wait. What do you mean that he gained 9 lives? So basically, while Ted spent a good chunk of his career technically powerless, eventually Wildcat was cursed by King Inferno and Zatara. You gotta love when curses actually are more like blessings though. Zatara's curse halted Ted's aging process and gave him an extra 9 lives, like this is a video game or something. It's a pretty neat curse to be able to pull off, and in fact it's so good it kinda makes you wonder why Zatara wouldn't just give it to himself or his loved ones. Next up, it's Hawkman, just the whole character. His origins have changed many different times over the character's comic book existence. In his original 1940 origin, he is Egyptian royalty who has been reincarnated throughout time as a variety of different heroes before eventually becoming the archaeologist Carter Hall. When he was reintroduced in 1961, he was now an alien cop from the planet Thanagar named Qatar Hole, who comes to Earth and takes on the secret identity of Carter Hall. 2 years later, we learned that these two different versions are actually multiversal variants of each other, with the alien living on Earth 1 and the original being on Earth 2. Then in 1986, the Crisis on Infinite Earths happens and all the worlds are combined into one, so these two people were now both Hawkman at different points in history, with the original operating in the 40s and the alien operating in the 80s. In 1994's Zero Hour, these two become just one person. Then in 2011, Hawkman is, and always has been, a space cop from Thanagar. And then in 2017, Carter Hall was now a pharaoh who reincarnates it's because the knife that he was hard deleted with in ancient Egypt was made of nth metal from a Thanagarian ship, and then finally in 2018 it's decided that he can just reincarnate not just on Earth, but on different planets as well, and all of his powers are because of that nth metal, which itself makes no sense. Ronnie Raymond was a jock in high school who was also, funnily enough, also an environmentalist. When Ronnie showed up to protest the opening of a new nuclear power plant, he met Dr. Martin Stein, a Nobel Prize winning physicist who worked there. When the Firestorm Matrix reactor malfunctioned thanks to one of Ronnie's compadres, Stein and Raymond were both caught in the radioactive aftermath and somehow found themselves fused together into Firestorm, the nuclear man. Now, the two men are a being with two minds sharing the same body, usually with Raymond taking the lead. Alongside the rather unique one man with two minds thing, Firestorm also gained the ability to transmute any non-organic matter, having complete control over molecules. With this ability, he can do many things that honestly don't make a ton of sense. While regeneration, self-sustenance, density manipulation, shapeshifting, and all that makes sense given his molecular abilities, where it starts to fall apart for me personally is being able to walk through walls, because it's not like he's making his molecules intangible. He also has nuclear powers, which feels kind of unnecessary, and there's a few more things he can do that just push the boundary just a tiny bit. He's an incredibly powerful all-around character, but I think DC did him a disservice by making him kind of able to do anything at all and explaining it away as an added benefit of the accident that made him. Or them. Or him. I'm gonna go with him. And last up today, Superman has gone through a lot of changes during his time in DC Comics. While we now know what his powers are and they rarely change except for when they get like augmented or there's some kind of solar radiation ability, when he first showed up, his powers were still being developed by DC, and he went from being strong enough to pick up a car, leaping 1/8 of a mile, outrunning an express train and being mostly bulletproof, to flying faster than light, having enhanced strength, developing super hearing, x-ray vision, telescopic vision, heat vision, and being able to withstand an atomic blast. It was when we got to the Silver Age though that writers kind of started to run out of challenges for the character. So they started to create stories where the character would develop a new, very specific power that he would have for just one issue and it would almost never be seen again. Unsurprisingly, that on its own makes no sense. But sometimes the powers themselves made even less sense. For example, some of the one-issue powers Superman was granted included, and I'm not joking, super ventriloquism, super weaving, super hypnosis, and shooting literal tiny action figure-sized doppelgang versions of himself out of his hands that would fight crime as well. This is a guy who has dragged tons of planets all connected by a chain, so I guess there's really no point in trying to explain anything about Superman and what he can and can't do. Jessica Drew's Spider-Woman gained her powers from a serum based on arachnid blood and a genetic accelerator created by the High Evolutionary. While she gained some abilities that make sense for a spider, super strength and wall crawling abilities like Spider-Man, she also gained other powers that make, like, no sense. Drew gained venom blasts. Now this wasn't venom like when you get bit by a poisonous spider. Similar to Miles Morales, her body possesses an inordinate amount of bioelectricity that she has learned to channel and discharge through her hands in controlled bursts that vary in power, from being able to stun a person's nervous system to being able to completely take their lives. Now, I'm not really complaining that much because I like how her and Miles use this ability, and it is pretty darn cool. All I'm saying is that I don't know any spiders personally that can discharge bioelectricity, and I should know because I asked Google. Funnily enough though, spiderwebs are able to conduct some electricity, so little fun fact for you. There you go. But while we're on the topic of spider people who call themselves Spider-Woman, the second Spider-Woman was Julia Carpenter, who gained her powers when Valerie Cooper had her join an athletic study that saw Julia doused with a mixture of spider venom and plant extracts. That's cool. This isn't about weird ways people gain their powers. The problem is that a chunk of Julia's main powers were psionic in nature. She used psionics in order to wall crawl and fire psionic make webs. According to the wiki, by using psychokinetic energy, she can, quote, bind ambient free-floating molecules into strands of solid force. She can do most of the same things Spider-Man can do with these webs, including webbing up bad guys and even swinging. But then, her psi webs can also be used in ways Spider-Man's webs never could, such as causing webs to form from a distance or controlling the movement of her webbing mentally. It's always been just like a tiny little bit weird and ridiculous, but the main question I have about it is just, why? David Haller, or as he came to be known, Legion, was living in Paris with his mother when her home was invaded by a team of assassins. They took out David's stepfather before his eyes, which kicked off his latent psionic powers, which he used to incinerate the brains of the assassins. As he did that, he also made telepathic contact with each of his victims, thus experiencing their thoughts and emotions as they were incinerated, which, as you can imagine, deeply affected David and forced him into a catatonic state. Now, this event had splintered David's personality into multiple alters, with each of these alters controlling a different psionic power. David became an Omega level mutant able to create spontaneous mutations of different kinds that are accompanied by new personas or alters to govern each of these new mutations. Now, David himself stated that he had 200 Omega level split personalities, and originally all of Legion's powers were psychically based, but since his resurrection, Legion has also manifested physical mutations, and his mind is shown as being inhabited by thousands of alters. Now obviously, this is not at all how personality disorders work at all, and it makes very little sense that new powers just kind of form, but man, if the character is not incredibly complex and interesting, so it's perfectly fine. It is actually fine, it's cool. Now while you may think that the power of Bruce Banner to turn into a big old rage monster with infinite strength and durability who can shake the literal multiverse with his punches is pretty unrealistic and maybe makes no sense, it's actually the Hulk's ability to see ghosts that has always confused me. The Hulk persona has the ability to see astral projections and ghosts, and he can even interact with them if he chooses to. Hulk's astral form perception has come in handy when working with Doctor Strange as a defender. Now, as with most of Bruce Banner's issues, this is because of his father. Bruce subconsciously feared his father's ghosts would come back to haunt him. Like literally come back to haunt him, and so the Hulk just developed this mechanism to allow him to look out for that ghost. There isn't really more to it than that. For the super intelligent Bruce Banner, it would make a bit more sense, but it's actually been suggested that Bruce has a diminished ability to see these ghosts when compared to the telepathically resistant Hulk. Now next up, I'm going to talk about Wolverine's healing factor, because seriously, WTF. I love Wolverine's healing factor. It's an awesome ability and it makes him so much more compelling, but that thing has not only been wildly inconsistent, it has also stopped making sense way long ago. Back in the day, Wolverine would be able to heal from flesh wounds and other relatively minor injuries almost instantly, with bigger injuries usually taking quite a bit longer to recover from. But that's changed, especially with more modern stories and people kinda just accepting it as part of his character. Now, almost all injuries heal pretty instantly and aren't even a problem for the little guy. But even more than that, injuries that have either threatened to or literally have sent him on a one-way trip to the big guy upstairs in the past are just a walk in the park for the mutant now. I like that Wolverine seems to survive almost anything. It's cool, and I get that his healing factor has been enhanced or diminished for certain stories, but I don't know, sometimes you can poke holes in comic book logic, that's just how it works. Now, a lot of people in the comments of the last video had something to say about me choosing Thumbelina because I said that she shouldn't be able to retain her full strength at that tiny little size. And I stand by that. It doesn't compute for me. But what about all the Ant-Men? What about Wasp? Those guys mostly get a free pass because they have the magical Pym particles that magically allow them to retain their mass at shrunken sizes. It's actually science, but whatever. Fine, whatever. But how the heck do Wasp's wings work? Do Pym particles' magical mass effects also affect her wings somehow? I'm sure there is some kind of comic book explanation somewhere out there, but logically, there is absolutely no way those tiny little wings should be able to lift Wasp, who I shall remind you, retains her full-grown mass at her miniature size. I'll give you the Wasp being able to punch out a full-grown man at a minuscule size due to her mass being the same. There you go. But don't you dare tell me in the same breath that those minuscule little wings are somehow creating enough lift to allow the weight and mass of a full-grown superwoman to fly. But okay, let's bounce right off that and talk about Hank Pym. So he's been using these Pym particles to shrink himself down while retaining his mass. Cool, whatever. So, explain to me what happens when he gets bigger. Please tell me he retains his same mass. If that is the case, he should not be able to do the stuff that he does. He should not be super strong. If he is retaining the same mass, then his muscles are not getting any denser, which is the only way he would get stronger. Now, if you're going to tell me that as he grows, his muscles do get denser and he increases in mass, then there is almost no way he should be able to realistically move, especially not with the speed at which he sometimes does. Now I promise you, Ant-Man, and all you other shrinking and or growing heroes, I promise you, I will bring you down. Your entire empire of pseudoscience lies right down on your heads. I swear it. Okay. Cool. Enough about the tiny little people. Now we talk about a king of Atlantis. Namor the Submariner has many things about his character and abilities that give one pause, but most of it is kind of hand-waveable, and that's because Namor's kinda cool. He's a jerk, but he's kinda cool. What I refuse to just wave off, what I refuse to turn a blind eye to, is those ridiculous ankle wings. Nah. Absolutely not. If the Wasp's little micro wings shouldn't be able to lift her normal mass, then there is no way in all the 7 seas that Namor can generate lift with his flimsy little ankle wings. Generating lift is one thing, but then His Royal Highness actually moves with some significant speed. He is able to fly at the speed of escape velocity when exerting himself fully, and at normal levels he is able to fly faster than military aircraft. Just no. The Marvel Wiki even makes note of the fact that those little winglets could never let him fly that fast, so it's suggested that he flies by some other means and uses the wings to steer. I'll tell you how he flies. BS. That's how. A big pile of BS. Now, there are a lot of characters in comics who have access to energy-based powers. It's been a thing for a long time, but there is a big difference to being able to use energy and being energy. The Avenger known as Wonder Man is a being of ionic energy. This energy gives him insane levels of superhuman strength, invulnerability, effective immortality, energy manipulation, and all that fun stuff. He is not a big old meat sack like the rest of us. He stated during an incident in which all the living things in New York had been morphed into symbiotes that he was an ion being, and it was the prime reason that he himself had not been infected. Wonder Man's physical form is purely subjective. What shape or form he takes is ruled by conscious thought, but funnily enough, he still has a healing factor that lets him survive very physical attacks. And funnily enough, in his early days, almost all of his abilities were physical in nature. I like Wonder Man. I just see some rather interesting things here. That's all I'm saying. And finally, Wanda Maximoff is problematic in many different ways. She has used her abilities to rewrite history and the state of the entire world, and she's used them to rob millions of mutants of their own powers. She's materialized entire alien invasion forces, made people intoxicated when they were not, and that was all mainly due to a thing called the Life Force retcon. When Wanda first appeared, she had the ability to alter probability, and then she gained access to chaos magic. Now, once you put the word magic in there, you can basically just throw all the logic out the window and just smile and nod. She is a magical character, so all realism is automatically suspended. Like other magical Marvel characters, she can call on divine empowerment, she can do almost anything, really. It's just that Wanda will go from being like just the Scarlet Witch to basically a godlike being without much warning or explanation, depending on who is writing her. It's just really hard to get a thumb on what her actual capability is, because one minute she can alter her entire reality, and the next she needs a power boost. It's hard to know where her baseline is, so maybe this point isn't so much about her powers not making sense logically, but that they just need to be a little bit better defined. Hawkeye. Clint Barton is essentially just a regular human man, but despite that, he's considered considered a power level 4 according to Nick Fury's intel. This is due to his incredible level of skill and ability. Hawkeye is a master of archery in the use of regular bows, longbows, compound bows, and crossbows, with basically perfect accuracy, able to fire multiple arrows at a single target in a few seconds, hitting multiple targets in a few quick strokes, and directly hitting small targets in the greatest of distances, but he also has near perfect precision with any aimed or thrown weapon. He is at the peak level of human eyesight possible. He is in peak athletic human condition with peak strength, endurance, and reflexes. He is an expert acrobat, tactician, and master martial artist. And it's seemingly all from just practice and training really hard. To show you how ridiculous this is, in Avengers Volume 3 number 14, Hawkeye was cornered by about 17 marksmen and he took them all down without taking a single life. In Hawkeye Volume 4 number 1, Clint ran into a wanted criminal in a bar and he took him down completely silently by, get this, fracturing his neck with a deck of cards. And last but not least, you know that Winter Soldier scene from the MCU with Captain America taking out all those dudes in an elevator? Hawkeye did the same thing in Volume 2 number 3 of his own comic, and that was way before Cap, who is a super soldier, I will remind you, got the credit. The mutant and original X-Man, Forget-Me-Not, might be a case of people judging a book by its cover, because he doesn't really look too menacing if we're being honest. And to be fair, his powers do also sound pretty lame at face value. Basically, this mutant can't be remembered by anyone, and sometimes anything he meets as soon as he's out of sight. And as sad as this must be for him in his personal life, Forget-Me-Not can use this power to his advantage in huge ways in the right circumstances. In one case, he's even able to dupe all of X-Force when the team has to form an elaborate plan just to track him down. They're only able to finally catch him by having Dr. Nemesis record himself explaining to the team the existence of Forget-Me-Not as they search for him. The only caveat to this whole tedious process is that the maintenance bots, along with, I'm assuming, any computer automated system, can actually remember Forget-Me-Not if it doesn't get glitched out, which sort of weakens the potential of his powers. But again, don't be fooled. You know when the X-Men seem to just miraculously figure out a secret or a previously unknown way to defeat an almost unbeatable opponent? 90% of the time, that's just Forget-Me-Not, and the X-Men just forget him, but not the information that he gives to them. Now, Nina Thurman is a mutant weapons expert and mercenary under the name Domino. She was introduced in the early 90s as a member of X-Force. Now, Domino is the survivor of a bunch of unethical scientists who are trying to create the perfect weapon. It's the tale as old as time, really, but this means Domino has all the talents and skills you would expect of an expert mercenary or secret agent. But we're here to talk about powers, and Domino's are unique to say the least. Domino has probability manipulation powers, meaning she's almost always lucky. She exudes at all times a subconsciously activated field that alters the probability of occurrences in her line of sight into her favor. This means that whenever she is stressed, excited, or focused on something, things will probably go well for her, and quite poorly for her opponents. Now, there is a caveat to this. She needs to actively be trying to help herself for her powers to work. So, like, if debris is falling from the sky and was about to hit her in the head, she would still be hurt if she stood still. However, if she tried to avoid them, she would move perfectly to avoid each and every piece about to hit her. Now, the full potential of Domino's abilities hasn't actually been fully realized as of yet, and Marvel has a knack for updating powers whenever they want, but with an ability to be lucky, there's only a finite amount of things you cannot do. Now, while the powers of Domino are still fresh in your minds, this is a perfect opportunity to talk about Iska the Unbeaten. Iska also has a form of limited psychokinesis, which is probability manipulation, or known as the power of luck, which is probably one of the most unexplainable powers because we can't even really say that luck is for sure a real thing. But Iska takes it one step further than Domino into ridiculousness with the power of being literally unable to lose. Iska has the power to always win, no matter what. Whether that is in individual one-on-one contests, votes, wagers, or even just larger battles where she's a member of a group. In contests of skill, her powers might give her the talent she needs to win, or she might just win through improbable circumstances, quote unquote. In larger battles or even wars, her powers detect the probability of both sides winning and have literally led her to defect from the losing side and join the winning side, meaning she still personally wins. It's not that we don't necessarily understand it. I mean, I don't understand it. It's just that it can't even properly be explained without sounding just ridiculous. I love her though. I love that character. Next up, the Inhuman known as Reader has a very fitting name, as he possesses the really cool ability to make whatever he reads actually real, which if you think about it should be practically impossible and is also a truly incredible power. Reader is a part of a group of Atalan Inhumans who live on Earth that call themselves the Lore. Now, because of Reader's potentially immense power, the people of the Lore tribe took his eyes out, making him unable to actually read things. On top of this, Reader has mental blocks in place that stop him from accidentally rewriting reality by reading the wrong things. Now, how does he still read with no eyes? The same way blind people do. Braille. Reader carries around Braille cards that have single words on them that allow him to do different things in combat and in given situations. For example, he has a card that says see in Braille that, when read, allows him to see through the eyes of other people. Or the back and freeze cards, which allow him to go back in time or pause time respectively. He basically has reality warping powers, but he does have a weakness in the form of only being able to use 3 words a day that gradually become less and less powerful, which is quite the nerf, but it also makes the whole this makes no sense thing even stronger. Christina Anderson has an ability that quite a few characters in comic books have. That would be the ability to shrink. Thumbelina can reduce herself down to about 1/4 of an inch tall. Now that ability is perfectly fine in my eyes. Like I said, lots of characters can do this. My problem with Thumbelina, and also some other shrinkers, is how the heck do they retain their full-size strength when they get smaller? Or, in Thumbelina's case, how does she get stronger when she shrinks? I'm sorry to try and bring physics into any debate about superheroes and their various powers, but it makes absolutely no sense in the laws of physics that someone who is smaller can be more strong than when they were the regular size. Ants, for example, if they were the size of a person, they would be insanely strong, as they are able to carry 20 times their body weight. So that's like an average human being able to carry a small SUV. But since ants are so small, that means they can carry like a leaf. Thumbelina should not be able to knock someone out when she is 1/4 of an inch tall. I'm sorry, it just shouldn't make sense. Speaking of which, Robbie Rodriguez, who goes by El Guapo, is a mutant from the Marvel Universe, but that kind of opens up a whole bunch of questions, because Robbie doesn't seem to have any powers of his own, unless you consider his symbiotic relationship with a flying skateboard a superpower. His wiki page refers to this as idiosyncratic manipulation, suggesting that Robbie actually has total control over his skateboard, but the problem with that is that his skateboard has also acted of its own accord, like when it beat him up for cheating on his girlfriend. Now, an argument could be made that perhaps that's his own subconscious beating himself up for doing the wrong thing, but that's just a me theory, and Marvel did not state this to be true at all, or really even explain his ability in any way, shape, or form. It's not telekinesis, and the board seems to have a mind of its own. You explain it to me, because I can't. Adam Narimani, or Adam X, was a genetically created hybrid of both Emperor Deken of the Shi'ar Empire and Catherine Summers from Earth, created in an attempt to introduce more genealogies to the Shi'ar Empire. Now, just as his origin is unique, so are his powers. Adam has the ability of electrokinetic hemopyrokinesis, or if you don't want to have a stroke, you can say sanguine combustion, which also sounds super cool. It basically means that he can send an electric surge through oxygenated blood, which leads to ignition of the electrolytes present in the blood, causing a person to burn from the inside out, which could result in a little subtle warming effect, which is lovely, or it could completely disintegrate a person, so there's a lot of wiggle room here. But thanks to his Shi'ar side of things, he also has enhanced strength, agility, reflexes, stamina, speed, vision, and healing. You couple all that with his awesome fighting skill and the cool cybernetic retractable claws, and he's just someone you don't want to mess with, but also he can set fire to your blood. In our runner-up spot today, Chamber, or Jonathan Evans Starsmore, discovered his powers when a blast of psionic energy just literally burst from his torso and destroyed much of his chest and face. It turns out that Chamber is literally composed of that same psionic energy, with his body just acting as a shell for it. When his powers burst out of him, the wound was replaced by a constant glow of psionic fire, leaving him unable to speak. Instead, he can only communicate telepathically. Additionally, he doesn't eat, drink, or even breathe, as he has literally no organs. It's just energy inside of him all the time. Chamber constantly created and unleashed psionic charges of energy that could strike with volatile force, being projected as a blast from his chest, a series of guided streams that struck specific targets, or as a massive eruption striking in all directions. If he was given the time to train properly, Chamber could have potentially been one of the most powerful mutants to walk the earth, but his powers make no sense. Okay, so many Inhumans have incredibly unique and awesome powers. Only Karnak's ability isn't so much a superpower as it is a learned skill, kind of like Hawkeye. Karnak never went through the process of Terrigenesis, which would have activated his Inhuman gene and given him actual powers. Since he never went through this process, he has all the enhancements of a regular Inhuman, including super strength, speed, stamina, and durability. But unlike other Inhumans, Karnak has trained himself to be an extremely powerful martial artist, and beyond that, he developed an incredibly powerful trait of being able to sense weak points, fracture planes, and stress points in enemies, objects, plans, arguments, and anything really, including concepts. Obviously, in combat, he can use this alongside his martial skills to defeat opponents even more quickly, but the applications outside of combat are incredibly useful as well. For an example, just one example, because that's really all I need, he found a weakness in death itself and was able to bring himself back to life, which you just win at that point, man. You're just done.
Wolverine's healing factor is a mystery. It can make him come back from anything, it seems. It's truly amazing what Wolverine has survived. He survived being at point zero for the bombing of Hiroshima, being one of the men at the Valentine's Day Massacre, multiple world wars, fighting death, being completely destroyed aside from a single drop of himself. How is he still standing? I don't get it. I think Deadpool explains it best. He survives because he's popular. You can't kill off Wolverine. He's Wolverine. He's iconic. Every time he goes away, we want him back. So is it a powerful healing factor keeping the hero around, or fan devotion? I'm not complaining though. Love our Canadian king. Looking forward to seeing Hugh Jackman don the blue and yellow in Wolverine and Deadpool in a few months. Bailey Hoskins is thebomb.com. Literally, he is a bomb. He can blow up, but only once. His power seems ridiculous because that was the point. Bailey debuted in Worst X-Men Ever by Max Bemis. Max wanted to explore what it would be like if someone joined the X-Men that was basically useless until death. Still, you have to wonder, how does Bailey even know how to detonate without ever being able to practice? Is it like breathing? He just knows. How often did he get close to detonation just from sneezing wrong? He got a power suit at one point, but was usually just his human appearing self. His miniseries is cute and pokes fun at the X-Men franchise, so if that's your thing, check it out. Lila Cheney is a rock star and ally to the X-Men. Lila wasn't always a good guy. She did try to steal the Earth once, but she eventually came around. She is capable of intergalactic teleportation. The problem is she can't control it. She also can't travel short distances. It has to be thousands of miles away. I don't understand why. The current explanation is that to teleport she creates a Tachyon field around herself. The field converts matter into particles that are faster than the speed of light. The only thing she can control is what direction she goes in. Apparently once she activates her powers, they just go before she can even think stop. She's already super far away. But in order for her to go anywhere, she needs to specifically know it. If that is the case, shouldn't she just be able to picture her kitchen and go there? To get around the teleportation glitch, she set up a sort of base point, the Dyson sphere. She goes there first, then to her next point, kind of like a plane connection. The other thing is that if her voice is somewhere, she can teleport there. It can cause problems because she is a famous singer, her voice is in a lot of places, but if she has to know specifically where she wants to go, shouldn't just having her voice somewhere not cut it? I don't get it. Ariel the alien is known for her teleportation powers and ability to persuade anyone. You might also recognize her for her bright, over-the-top outfits. She was designed in the 80s and it shows in the most iconic way. The Met Gala is coming up soon and I can't help but think she would fit right in. Ariel is from the planet Coconut Grove and it looks like your average 80s nightclub. All Coconut Grove aliens are capable of teleportation using doors. If there are no doors, too bad. But what I'm confused about is that this ability is apparently not limited to just Coconut Grove residents. It's suggested that anyone could do it if they have the right hands and a good grounding in subjective physics. Has this ever been explored again? I don't think so. Let me know if I'm forgetting something. The only other time I've seen door teleportation like this was in Monsters Inc. In addition to the door powers, Ariel and her family are the mutants of their world, as they are capable of super persuasion. Ariel is described as she who speaks like water running across the stones. Ariel can make people do or think almost anything she wants using her charming, persuasive voice. However, it seems like a lot of the effectiveness is based on what language she uses, how she knows what to use. I don't know, probably lots of trial and error. Ariel ended up in San Francisco and then joined the X-Men and stayed affiliated with the team since. Hector Rendosa has transparent skin. How is that useful? I'm not sure. Maybe for scientists to study the functions of the human body in real time. Hector did have another power and it caused the see-through skin. It was an invisibility field. The unfortunate part was that the invisibility didn't work all the way and his skin turned invisible instead of all of him. I don't really know what would be worse, your mutant ability manifesting seemingly halfway and you walk around with your organs out all the time, or if it actually manifested completely and you were invisible forever. He was also able to transfer his invisibility field by touching someone else. He would go back to normal and whoever he touched was affected. And I do suppose in a battle situation that would be a good kind of like psych out tactic. Personally, I'm not used to seeing my organs, so if I were to ever grab this guy with malicious intent, seeing my internal organs would absolutely send me into a panic and he would win. I'm still confused though. Hector was one of the mutants that was depowered after M-Day, so he would have just returned to normal again. Very similar to Hector, the same but different is Glob. Glob is made of bioparaffin wax or living wax. He is a glob of it that commonly takes the form of a human body. The wax is flammable, so he can become a flaming version of himself. He can also fling bits of himself. I have to wonder about that one though. Are the bits kind of like fingernails? Like when I lose a piece of my fingernail, it will just grow back? I'm assuming because he is never lacking wax. He is considered invincible since his wax makes him resistant to damage. He once took a bomb for the Institute and came out fine. Tough kid. I would say that another one of his superpowers is that he's funny. Zorn is a confusing character overall. His origin was one thing and then it was another. He was actually Magneto. Wait, never mind. We need Magneto alive for something else. Okay, Zorn is actually real and also his head is a star. Sorry? What? Someone's head being a star? That's wild. It's a marvel he keeps that thing star even if it is just mini. Because it's a star, he could reverse the natural state of it to make a black hole. It also means he has magnetokinesis or the ability to control magnetic fields. That's why he could fake being Magneto. The star also produces a blinding light because if you were to look him in the eyes, you would be staring into a mini sun. It can also incinerate you so you will not make it out of there no matter what. He also, because his head is a star, doesn't need to breathe or eat or drink water. I've never got that in anything. If someone has a body, how is it sustained without those things? I don't get it, unfortunately. Give me a few days of thinking time, I will get there. Zorn is also a vibe checker. He knows if someone has passed in his general vicinity. I think it has something to do with the fact that he can feel the movement of energy and emotions, I think. Ice Cream, as a whole, I don't understand, but the powers especially. Ice Cream is a mutant that can turn into ice cream. Any flavor, he's not limited. It does have its benefits. Turning into a pile of ice cream means he can slip through grates and tight spaces. However, I can't imagine he is good on the offensive front unless his opponent is lactose intolerant. I suppose he could turn into ice cream and drown someone from the inside out, then that person would have to go to the afterlife with the story that they drowned from ice cream, and that's just funny or embarrassing. The last time I talked about ice cream, I mentioned that in addition to ice cream, he could even turn into a banana split. Someone commented commented on the video pointing out that a banana split isn't ice cream. You're right, I know that. That's why I'm so confused. Who came up with this? Ice cream has only appeared about like 2 times in the comics. I wonder why. Though he has limited appearances, that does not mean he has no fans. The additional confusing thing about him is he doesn't spell it ice cream with like the letter I, it's E-Y-E, and there's no explanation as to why that is. Soft Serve is a big fan of ice cream. Sometimes talking about certain characters brings me physical pain, and Soft Serve is one of them. Soft Serve is a mutant that poops ice cream. I hope no one is watching this video while eating ice cream. If you are, I'm sorry. Soft Serve can create any flavor of ice cream, and apparently it's actually pretty good. Forge tried it and said it was great. He definitely took one for the team. I don't think many X-Men are strong enough to do that. Obviously, the power is weird. It's weird, so how did it happen? It turns out that she isn't really using her own body to create the ice cream. Her body is actually a portal to the ice cream dimension. So the portal on her body just happens to be in an unfortunate location. Other than her being a big fan of ice cream, the pair are not related. Soft Serve also, shockingly, has only 2 appearances. Mystique has recently been revealed to be a gene shaper, not just a shapeshifter, which is very cool and very confusing. The difference, to put it simply, shapeshifters change their shape, they mimic someone else's look. Gene shapers become that person, rewriting their DNA until they are a copy. That's how Mystique was able to become Nightcrawler's father instead of mother. She gave herself male working anatomy. The thing that has fans wondering though is if she can become an exact gene level copy of someone, why can't she replicate mutant abilities? She can copy them, sure, we've seen that when she copied Wolverine's claws, but that was all surface level. She never actually fully gains the powers. It turns out that the reason might be simple, but also makes everything way more complicated. Mystique appears to currently be limited when it comes to mimicking the X gene. Regular genes walk in the park, she doesn't even need to think about it. It's the X gene that's tricky. Does that mean she can't? No, she probably can if we are being honest. Now that the big reveal of Nightcrawler's parents has been done, Mystique's writers have the ability to explore her X gene mimicking abilities.